Here are the most wild One Piece theories explained. Crocomum. So this is a very popular one that you've probably heard of, and I have to say it makes a disturbing amount of sense. Back in the Impel Down days, Emporio Ivankov threatened to reveal a secret that he knew about one Sir Crocodile. Something so embarrassing, so dark, that it kept this usually untamable sand-based reptile in check. So a lot of people jumped to the conclusion that, of course, Ivankov just knows about Crocodile's weakness against water, which in the One Piece world it's a bad weakness to have because of all of the water. However, years later, Eiichiro Oda dropped an absolute bombshell. In Crocodile's Viviacard databook entry, it states that he's got a weakness when it comes to his past that he can't oppose. He definitely owes something that Ivankov gave to him. And just what could Ivankov have possibly given to Crocodile? Well, many now suspect that Ivankov gave Crocodile his very own Will of D. The images we've seen of young Crocodile paint him as quite androgynous, something reflected in his recently revealed Seraphim as well. Meanwhile, Crocodile has been quite deliberately obscured in flashbacks, such as Roger's execution. Did Ivankov swap Crocodile's gender? The answer is, surprisingly, potentially yes. Notably, Oda has also drawn Crocodile as a woman, but to be fair, this is true of every Warlord, Straw Hat, and Worst Generation member. The Femcroc theory is actually quite strong in my opinion. However, this then transitions into the leading meme theory that Crocodile must also have been Luffy's mother, which means that Crocodile and Monkey D. Dragon have had relations in the past. There's nothing to actually support the mother part, it is purely meme. Mihawk is Kuina. So this is another Ivankov-centric theory, but just hear me out. Kuina's death via stairs has always seemed just a little bit suspicious. I mean, she is by far the most talented sword slicer in the village, and she got done in by down D stairs? Nah. I don't think so. So here's the thing. Around this time, the Revolutionary Army was seen docking at Shimotsky Village, having just come from the Goa Kingdom, and Ivankov is aboard. And in terms of the timeline, this happens within a year of Kuina quote-unquote dying. Meeting Ivankov would have been a dream come true for Kuina, because the only thing holding her back in life was the fact that she was not a boy. To pursue her dream, Kuina's death could have been faked, and when questioned about this, Koshiro realized that he hadn't quite thought this through, panicked, and said the first thing that came to his mind, which was apparently stairs. Kuina then starts a new life under the name Dracul Mihawk. He sets out to sea, meets a Shanks, had various fights with sharp metal, and eventually became the world's strongest swordsman and is waiting for Zoro. It all sounds quite compelling with the exception of just one tiny small thing, which is that Kuina was born 2 years after Roger was executed, and that's problematic because Mihawk was present for said execution. Other than that, it's a super compelling theory. And at the very least, you'd have to say that it's quite a cruel twist of fate to have the solution to all of Kuina's problems right there in front of her, and she never even knew it was there. The original world's greatest swordsman, Mihawk in all of his non-Kuina glory, has had a very distinctive design since day one, particularly the paisley pattern of his coat arms and inner lining, which is why it was quite surprising when we saw Silver's Rayleigh in a flashback, and he had an extremely similar coat, also lined with a paisley pattern, albeit purple. But back when we didn't know the color schemes, it was hypothesized that this was even the very same coat, as if inheriting this coat might be a sort of passing of the torch for the world's greatest swordsman, like a crown for a king, or as a more modern example, the POTUS Twitter account for the President of the United States, because that's the world we live in now. We used to have crowns, now we have Twitter accounts. But this idea implies that Rayleigh was the former world's greatest swordsman, which he may very well have been, further mirroring the first mate relationship with Roger that Zoro has with Luffy. And you know, were it not for characters like Mihawk and Shanks, Rayleigh probably still would be the world's greatest swordsman. However, it's very tricky because the coats are different colors with distinctly different paisley patterns as well. And these days, it's more commonly speculated that Mihawk is the son of Shaki and Rayleigh, having perhaps inherited some of his father's clothing, or at the very least, having been introduced to the same tailor. Because, you know, maybe Mihawk just has a very retro aesthetic. The Rocks Pirates Cloning Project. A year ago, this probably would have been the stupidest thing one could say. But now, it's the most logical theory in this entire video. After Mads, the fictional science equivalent of the Power Rangers, successfully pioneered cloning, they embarked on a project to clone at least 2 members of the Rocks Pirates. Stussy of CP0 was revealed to be a clone of Miss Buckingham Stussy, who was a former Rocks member, and the OG Buckingham Stussy herself even implied that her son, Weevil, is a clone, which would make sense because Weevil looks like Whitebeard if you baked him, but only following every second instruction of the recipe. But here's the thing. We have Rocks clones of 2 members, but why stop there? Jewelry Bonnie, for example, has been connected to Big Mom due to her hair, lipstick, insatiable appetite, and both have driving ships that look very much like food. Sakazuki is also terrified of Bonnie, which would make sense if she had the potential to be another Big Mom. But there could also be clones of Kaido, Shiki, Captain John, and you know what? Rox Dieselbeck himself could have been cloned, resulting in Marshall D. Teach. And that's why Blackbeard has such a mysterious body, all because of botched science. And speaking of, Blackbeard is 3 people. So Blackbeard is a walking contradiction. He has evil genius levels of smart, but also Luffy levels of dumb. He has the bravery of a Zoro, but also the cowardice of an Usopp. Meanwhile, he's also insanely powerful, but also surprisingly weak whenever we actually get to see him fight. He doesn't make sense. And this is what led people to think that perhaps it's not just one guy. There's more than one, I think. Multiple personalities, or perhaps even multiple people sharing the same body. And to be fair, it is a big body. There is plenty of space. There are whole apartments in central Sydney with less surface area than Blackbeard. And this may be alluded to with his 3-skulled Jolly Roger, which are generally representations of the captain. And this also might provide the answer to how he's able to use multiple fruit powers, one for each Blackbeard. Or, something like that. Gin is everyone. The end of Baratie teased the audience with the potential future return of Gin, after he stated that he hoped to see Luffy again in the Grand Line. And since being fatally poisoned isn't a surefire way to kill anyone in One Piece, in fact very few methods are, this has meant that every subsequent Grand Line arc has been met with constant, and I mean very constant, anticipation of Gin's glorious return. Anyone in a mask is automatically Gin. Any new character silhouetted is automatically Gin. Sometimes even non-silhouetted, non-masked characters are also accused of being Gin. And it's the whole theory. Gin said that he wanted to meet Luffy again, so he will. Although in fictional reality, Gin, as with many East Blue figures, was probably just plonked in the forgotten bucket. Law is a member of SWORD. The first time I heard this idea was from Randy Troy's channel, and I do find parts of it quite compelling. The idea is that Law has a bit of a parallel story to Dia's Drake. Many people forget this, but Drake was found as a child by Sengoku on Minion Island, at the same time that Doflamingo, Rocinante, and Law were doing all of their stuff. Drake is the entire reason why Law escaped, because Doflamingo thought that Drake was Law. And then Drake went on to become a SWORD member, not just a member, a captain. So did the Marines also find and recruit Law at some stage as well? One Piece novel Law says no, at least not in the immediate next couple of years, but there's still a lot of blank time left unaccounted for. It should be noted that Rocinante himself was not a standard Marine. He was an undercover pirate, much like Drake. And Drake was the one who freed Law on Wano. He freed him for reasons. This is a currently unresolved plot point because we still don't know the exact reason why Drake did this, but Law replied with, "If letting me escape is part of some grand plan of yours, then I'll go along with it." Law also played a major part in the Rocky Port incident alongside Kobe, another member of SWORD. And while I think it's unlikely, Law does have a lot of coincidental connections to SWORD and the good side of the Marines in general. Certainly more so than most, if any other pirate. Time travel Shanks. This is a theory designed to answer one of the more perplexing questions of One Piece, which is how did Shanks get to the Paramount War in time? Mere hours before his special guest appearance in front of Sakazuki, Shanks was reported to have been facing off against Kaido in the New World. Shanks had intercepted him because Kaido wanted to join the war, which interestingly would have undoubtedly meant the destruction of the world government, because 2 emperors is too many. So how did Shanks not only resolve that conflict so quickly, but from the New World, how did he and his crew travel so swiftly to Marineford? And so the proposed solution is that he has some sort of time-based power. Time travel and manipulation has precedent through Toki and Foxy's Devil Fruits. However, Shanks is confirmed to not be a Devil Fruit user. Devil Fruits aren't the only source of time manipulation. Observation Haki can already be used to see into the future. So could another form, perhaps a Conqueror's Haki, be used in combination to exert will over time? Could Shanks have paused the world just long enough to rock up and stop the war? Maybe he did, or maybe we're just reading into things far too much that Oda doesn't really care about. The Mushroom Man. You know what? I take back what I said about the Rox clones theory, because this is undoubtedly the most logical theory in the entire video. This idea dates back to a blog from 2018, but gained a lot of mainstream steam through the attention of Parvision. And you know what? Even I did a video on it. But essentially, there is a very obscure race in this world known as the Kinokobito, which means Mushroom Man. And we see a live one briefly in Big Mom's terrifying species catalog, but very notably, they have 4 legs. And even in the One Piece world, that is a bit wild and wacky, but it is not without precedent. The only other non-centaur human creature with 4 legs in this world is Vanderdecken, and his ancestor was not a fishman. The original Vanderdecken came down from the surface. So the idea is that the OG Vanderdecken was a Kinokobito, and the younger Vanderdecken is part heart mushroom. It just makes far too much sense. World Party. The premise here is that Luffy has a hidden dream, and only Ace, Sabo, Yamato, probably Momonosuke now, the rest of the Straw Hats, and maybe Karibo know what it is. It's something that even becoming the Pirate King is a simple stepping stone to achieving. And some people like to go into big epic ideas like tearing down the Red Line, destroying the world government, and all of this overall good guy stuff. But they ignore that Luffy has had this dream since he was a child, long before he even knew that there was a Red Line or a world government. So it's something so simple that even a child could dream it, but also something so impossible to achieve that even an adult couldn't accomplish it. And it's also a dream that Roger shared. And the idea is that Luffy's true dream is to throw the biggest party in the world, using that as the criteria to prove once and for all that his crew is better than Shanks' crew. Simple, very simple, but nigh on impossible to achieve. Rocks D Dragon. This theory starts with the idea that Dragon and Rocks do share some distinct visual similarities, or at least as many as you can reasonably tell from a silhouette, but they also share a similar goal: to overthrow the world government. And Rocks was described as more of a terrorist than he was a pirate, which mirrors how the world government describes Dragon. And both were very much the world's greatest criminal of their time. But that's not the convincing part. Quite curiously, Monkey D. Dragon has never been labeled as Garp's son. In fact, it seems like Oda has gone out of his way to hide their exact relationship, with Garp even referring to Luffy as, "You're just my kid's kid," meaning that Luffy's mother is very potentially Garp's daughter, and it was Dragon who married into the family, which isn't uncommon in Japan. Men do take their wives' last names in certain situations, essentially indicating that the bride's family have adopted the groom, which I can see Garp doing because he's kind of like a living funnel for orphans. And he very much believes that the sins of the father should not be suffered by the son. Plus, it would also be pretty amazing for Luffy to have some Will of Rocks in him. Red Line Destruction. So this idea has existed for so long that it's impossible to pinpoint where it originated. But the theory is that the Red Line is an unnatural man-made structure, deliberately segregating the world, and that the idea of an all blue existed at some point in history before it was erected. So here's what we do. Luffy will destroy the Red Line, which will unite the planet into one piece. This could even be the original purpose of the ancient weapons, and it would also incidentally create the all blue. But regardless of whether this is what the One Piece is, I do think that the destruction of the Red Line is what we're building towards. And as for the One Piece itself, the leading theory as of right now is Sake Piece. That's right, the One Piece is a bottle of sake. Sounds pretty underwhelming, right? Well, just give me a bit here. The first time I encountered this idea was through the Library of Ohara, who points out that sake connects almost everything in the One Piece world. Luffy became brothers with Ace and Sabo through sake. The Grand Fleet pledged themselves to Luffy again with sake. In fact, if everyone were to share sake together somehow, then this world would essentially become one big group of Nakama. But Arta then made a long list of how sake has been incorporated into major moments of the series surrounding dreams and the One Piece specifically. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but some highlights include Whitebeard declaring that the One Piece exists whilst reminiscing about drinking sake with Roger. When heading into the Grand Line, the Straw Hats all reaffirm their dreams over a barrel of sake. Dr. Hiroluck explains inherited will with a cup of sake. Meanwhile, when Blackbeard stated that a man's dreams never die, he did so while slamming down a bottle of sake. Also, Kozuki Oden has a very sneaky line, which is, "If I'm to be an accompaniment to one piece of sake, then that suits me fine." There's a lot, and I mean a lot more, but you get the idea. But one other very integral aspect to consider is Bink Sake. This is the song that all pirates know. The Roger pirate sang it, the Red Hair pirate sang it, and it's even gotten passed down to Luffy's generation. I mean, it also predates the Roger pirates, and I'm sure it will endure far beyond Luffy as well. But if you look carefully at the lyrics of this song, it actually appears to be telling the story of One Piece, and has also been speculated to hold key instructions for reaching Laugh Tale. And at which point the reward would be, what else? A bottle of sake to share with your comrades, just as in the song. Whether it's true or not, sake is definitely intrinsically connected to the lifeblood of One Piece, and I have to say it would be admittedly pretty funny for the solution to be something so mundane.